So today I'm going to show you how to make a basic coil mug. I'm going to show you how to make the base using the slab method and then the walls of the mug using the coil method. You will have access to this sheet. It is the coil building steps. It's going to be both on Google Classroom, and I will make sure all virtual students have a paper copy as well as all in-person students have a paper copy as well. It tells you the materials you need and step-by-step instructions along with pictures. So what I need to do first for my mug is I need to make a base. And you're going to need a template for that. In other words, I'm going to make a circular base, and I'm going to need some sort of circular shape to use to cut out that base. I'm going to use a solo cup. I have a ruler here. A solo cup is about a little less than 4 inches in diameter. You really don't want to make your mug bigger than 5 inches in diameter. It just gets too big and clunky. And we also have to be mindful of how much clay we use. So I'm going to use the edge of this solo cup to put down on top of my slab to get my base. Okay, so according to the directions I have and what you need to do, you need to roll out a flat base, right? A flat circular base. If you want to make your mug a different shape other than circle or cylindrical, you can do something triangular or square, but I'm going to show you a basic circular base. And for that, if you are an in-person student, you're going to have a piece of canvas, rolling pin, and either 3/8 inch or 1/2 inch thickness strips. If you are a virtual student, you may have these things at home. So if you were virtual since the beginning of the year, I gave you a piece of canvas, a rolling pin, and either 3/8 inch or 1/2 inch thickness strips. But if you went virtual part of the way through the year, you may not have those items. So I just want to kind of go over quickly what you can use instead. Instead of canvas, you can roll out an old t-shirt, an old piece of fabric, let's say from an old pillowcase or sheet. You want something between the table and the clay so that the clay doesn't stick to the surface that you're on. All right. For a rolling pin, if you don't have one in your kitchen, and you can use the one you have in your kitchen, you just need to wash it off. You could use a shampoo bottle or a moisturizing cream bottle, anything that's cylindrical. And for thickness strips, if you don't have thickness strips at home, you can simply put together some magazines or books like I did here, okay, and make sure, put them down, make sure they're about the same thickness. The thickness you're going for, again, is about 3/8 of an inch or 1/2 an inch, somewhere between 3/8 and 1/2 an inch. You don't want it thicker than that. So what are thickness strips used for? Thickness strips are used for putting on either side of the clay so that when you roll it out, you know that you're rolling it out at an even thickness. So you can use books or magazines to do that. I'm going to go grab my wedge clay, and we're going to use that to begin the process of making our mug. Sorry, I left it on the other table. Okay, so I have this big piece of wedge clay, all right? I don't need all of it for my base. So I'm going to wrap it up and spray it with a spray bottle. Spray the t-shirt here, the fabric, so it's nice and damp. All right, so here's the thing. You're gonna have to put some clay aside for the walls of the mug. So I'm gonna cut off a piece. You're gonna have to just estimate. This is probably more than enough for the base of my mug. All right, putting that to the side. The rest of it, I'm gonna wrap up with my very damp shirt, and I want it very damp, not soaked, but very damp, because I want this to stay nice and plastic. You either have a Ziploc bag or just a plain clear plastic bag. You're gonna put it in and keep it sealed up. You have a rubber band on it. I'm gonna use my hair tie because I don't have a rubber band handy at the moment. Put it to the side. Okay, so now I have this wedge piece of clay, and I wanna roll out a flat circular base for my mug. Okay, so I'm gonna kind of pound it onto my fabric or canvas just to flatten it a bit. All right, and notice that I started out with it as a circle or a sphere. That way when I pound it out, it's circular in shape. I'm gonna place it down. Now again, I'm either using my thickness strips if I have them, or if I didn't have my thickness strips, I would be putting a stack of magazines or books the same thickness, and you can use it much the same way you would thickness strips. All right, I just wanted to put that out there as an option for those of you who don't have thickness strips at home. So I'm gonna put my thickness strips on either side. I know my solo cup is 4 inches wide. I have more than enough clay. So I'm just gonna roll this out nice and flat. Remember, as you're doing this, that you wanna double check for air bubbles. So I'm just kind of rolling it out. And in case I see an air bubble that maybe I missed when I wedged, I can pop it with my pin tool. How do I know when I'm done rolling? Your rolling pin should roll all along the thickness strip, and it should touch it the whole way. In other words, your thickness strip and your rolling pin need to meet. That's how I know I've rolled my base nice and evenly. Put my thickness strip and rolling pin to the side. I'm gonna take my template. So your template could be a cup. It could be a roll of masking tape. You know, look around your house for those of you at home. Those of you in class will probably just use the solo cups. So I'm gonna put it on my base. I'm gonna take a pin tool. And you could also use a butter knife if you're home. And I'm just going along the edge of the cup to create a nice circular base for my mug. I'm gonna take the extra clay. Go, great. I'm gonna take this extra clay and just kind of pound it really quickly into a nice little block. And I can add it to my wedged clay, use it later for my coils. So I'm just gonna wrap it up and put it back in here. Remember, you don't wanna leave clay just kind of sitting out. You leave it sitting out and it's gonna dry up, and then you're not gonna be able to use it. I'm not gonna put the hairband, the rubber band back on it because I'm gonna use this clay in a moment, just putting it to the side. Now, if you are in class, you will have access to these banding wheels, which are these wheels that spin. If you're home, you will not have access to this, obviously, because I don't have enough to send home to students. So it's not required that you have this. It does make things a little bit easier. But if you have something at home that spins that you can put your project on, great. If not, don't worry about it. You should have a wood board. Most of you are gonna have a wood board smaller than this. Most of you are gonna have a 6-inch by 6-inch wood board. I just happen to have one that's big, okay? So now, I'm gonna reach underneath my canvas. Oh, before I do that, I wanna make sure I have a nice piece of fabric covering my board. So I'm actually gonna put a piece of t-shirt down. I'm gonna spray it damp. Always important to have a damp fabric underneath. Now I can go ahead and peel back canvas, take my base, put it onto my board that has a t-shirt on it, and now I'm ready to begin building up my coils, okay? So, how does that work? So as you've seen in the presentation that you watched with your clay teacher, coil method's been around a long time. I'll take my jewelry off. People have been doing it for thousands of years. The earliest known pottery, much of it was made using the coil method. Cultures from all over the world, Africa, Asia, Native Americans, use the coil method. So, how do you make a coil? I'm gonna keep my clay handy, okay? I have my base here. I'm gonna pull off a piece of clay and make like a little clay sausage out of it. You can see approximately the size of it. All right, and then I'm gonna have a flat surface to work on. You don't have to be on canvas, you can work directly. A kitchen countertop would be great. You want to avoid like wood tables, dining room tables that you don't want to, be pouring water on and get moisture on and that kind of stuff. So kitchen countertops, cement tops, you know, granite, stone, formica, that kind of stuff will work. If you have to be on a wood surface, I would put a garbage bag down and then maybe a piece of fabric. So I want to roll out a coil that's going to wrap around my project here, right, to make the first bit of the wall for the mug. And I want my coil to be about a 1/2 inch, 3/8 of an inch, okay? You know, you need to have a little extra clay on the coil so you can use it to blend. So I'm gonna put my little sausage of clay down. I'm gonna take my hands, my fingers, I'm not really rolling with my palm, I'm rolling with my fingers. And watch as I start in the center and then kind of go out to the side. And I do this nice and evenly because I'm trying to roll even coils. If you roll uneven coils, meaning they're really thick in one spot and super thin in the other, then inevitably the walls of your mug are gonna be uneven. So you can see that I'm rolling a pretty even coil just by using my fingers. Again, starting in the center and spreading my fingers out towards the edges of the coil. Still a little thick. This is closer to a little more than a 1/2 inch. So I'm gonna go a little bit more. And it's okay if it's longer than you need. If you find that your coil's getting it's a little thick in one area and thinner in another, you can kind of shift over and focus your attention on the thicker area. Okay, so now I have a nice coil. I'm gonna test it, see what it looks like on my base. I have just enough, and it feels just a little bit too thick. I don't want my mug to be super clunky. I want my walls to be about 3/8 of an inch thick. So I'm gonna roll this out just a tiny bit more. It's gonna give me a little bit more length. Okay, there we go. So you can see, using my fingers, I rolled a nice even coil. Okay, so using the tools that I have, all right, that were listed on this sheet that you have, I'm going to take my serrated rib tool and I'm going to score the outer edge of the base of my mug. Notice I'm doing it on top, not on the side, all right, on top of the base, right? I'm also going to take my coil, and I probably have more than I need, and that's okay. I can cut off the extra, and I'm going to score that as well. I'm just going to roll this end out just a tiny bit. I'm going to score this as well. I have a cup of water here. I suggest that in the cup of water, you put a little bit of clay, which is what I did, all right? Now I have slip, which is clay mixed with water, and I'm just gonna gently dab that onto my scored areas. If you don't like the feel of slip on your fingers, you can take the paintbrush that I gave you and dip it in there and use that. Notice I'm not pressing hard as I lay down the slip. I don't wanna get rid of the scored edges. I wanna just sort of dab the slip on. And then I'm going to carefully lay down my first coil. Now it may still look a little thick to you, but keep in mind, I need a little extra clay to fuse it. So that's why I made it slightly thicker than I eventually want my wall to be. Okay, so you might have something like this. And here's the benefit of the banding wheel, is you can spin it around and work on different sides of your mug. All right, so you're gonna have that extra sticking off most likely. All right, so I'm just gonna take the straight edge of my serrated rib tool and I'm gonna cut it. Now I have this extra coil. It's too small to do anything with. I have two choices. I can either wrap it up and put it back in my bag. I'm actually just gonna take it and put it in my slip cup, my cup of water, which is now my slip cup, and it'll turn into slip. Okay, so now I have the two edges of my mug, right? That edge that I just cut. So I'm going to score that, score the other one, add a little slip, and push it together. Okay? So it says I need to press firmly to make sure I'm removing air bubbles, which is what I'm doing now. All right? And then it says to use my curved wood tool, okay, to fuse the edges together. But I'm also going to suggest that you use the serrated tool as well. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to show you, is I'm just gently pressing with enough pressure to blend the clay seams together, but not pressing so hard that I completely warp the shape of my mug. I'm also going to blend the seam together where the two ends of the coil met. All right? And I'm going to go all the way around and do this. You may also find, this is why I said the serrated tool really helps too. You can actually, after you've fused it with the wood tool, I find that the serrated tool is really helpful for kind of straightening out the wall. Okay? And I'm going to be demoing how to make a straight cylindrical mug. So straight up and down. Some of you may decide to do a mug that comes out wider and then gets narrower. I'll talk about that separately with you if that's your design, but we're going to focus on making a nice straight cylindrical mug with straight walls. Okay, so you can see how I kind of began to blend the outside. Now I'm going to go ahead and do the inside. So this is a little bit trickier, and it gets trickier as your mug gets taller. And if you notice, I'm just doing a section of my wall right now for the purpose of speeding up the demo. So I'm both using the tool vertically and then horizontally. So the idea is that you make that seam on the inside disappear. See over here, you can still see the seam. Here we're making the seam disappear, okay? So just focusing in on that section right now. I will do some time-lapse video to show you the other side, but I want to show you how you get it nice and smooth. I'm going to use a sponge that's lightly damp. And when I say lightly damp, you shouldn't be able to squeeze this sponge and have tons of water dripping out of it. You should have no water dripping out of it. If you make your sponge too wet, you're going to make the clay super mushy, and it's going to make it very difficult to work. So you can see just in this section of my mug, I have a nice, straight, fused wall. Same thing on the inside. And now I'm going to pause and do some time-lapse photography to show you how to get the whole rest of the coil fused on there. Okay, so in the time-lapse portion of the demo, you saw me really fully fuse on the rest of that first coil. You probably saw me take my thumb and rub the inside, right? So I was using the wood tool for fusing, and then the serrated rib tool for also sort of blending the seams and flattening it out, all right? Another trick you can use, for students who are in my class, you will have access to wooden paddles, but at home, a spatula works great. It's also helpful to periodically kind of tap and pat the walls after you fuse the seams. You could even do a little bit tapping it on top to make sure it stays nice and even. And this will kind of ensure that as you build up, the walls stay nice and even and flat. Okay, so I went ahead and pre-rolled some coils so I can show you how to do the next round of coils. But I wanted to point out, before I put my next coil on here, in between the time-lapse portion of the video and what I'm filming now, I actually put this in front of a fan for about 3 minutes, 4 minutes. And the reason I did this is I wanted my clay to begin to get leather hard. As I begin to build up coil after coil after coil after coil, and I give my mug its height, if my clay stays really soft in the plastic stage, it will begin to collapse and fall apart. So my suggestion is to every 1 to 2 coils, most students will do it every 2 coils, to pause after you're done fusing, put it in front of the fan, then clean it up a little bit more, and then add another coil or 2. So, and if you don't have access to a fan at home, you can simply take a book, a magazine, and just, you know, hang out, listen to some music, and fan your mug. The idea is when you put on the next set of coils, you want to make sure that the base underneath it is leather hard. So when I feel this clay right now, it's still moist and I can push into it and squish it and shape it, but it's a little bit stiffer, and that's the leather hard stage. So I pre-rolled some coils. If you notice over here, I pre-rolled these and I'm keeping them wrapped in a damp shirt. So if your method is to do what I did, which is pre-roll a bunch of coils, maybe while you have your mug in front of the fan, if your hands are free and you're not fanning it with manually, then you can pre-roll some coils, but you don't want to just leave them sitting out. If you pre-roll coils, you want to make sure you're covering them up with a damp t-shirt so they stay plastic. When you're putting the coils on, they need to be plastic, but once they're on there, you want to set the clay a little bit more leather hard before you build your next set of coils. Okay, so as we did earlier, I'm just going to do one more coil for you, and then I will do a time lapse as I finish the mug, but I'll demo one more coil. Okay, so now I'm building on top of my existing leather hard coil. So I'm going to score it using my serrated rib tool. Score the coil itself. I have my slip cup. So I'm going to take my very wet clay, which is slip, and I'm going to just tap it on there. Okay. Then I take my coil, just like I did before, and because I'm making a straight cylindrical coil, I'm going to stack it right on top. If you wanted your coil to get wider, you would kind of put it out to the outer edge. But again, I think that I'm just going to continue demoing this as a straight cylindrical mug. And then if there's anybody out there who wants to make their mug a slightly different shape, I'll work with you individually, because I want to try to keep this demo video simple and to the point. I'm going to cut off a little bit of clay here to make that edge of that coil straight. And then again, using the straight edge of my serrated tool, I'm going to cut my coil. I'm going to take this extra clay. This time I'm going to, instead of putting it in the slip cup, I'm going to put it back with my wedged clay. Keep that covered and out of the way. Now I'm going to score the edge of my coil, put a little slip on it. Okay. Press it down firmly, press those edges together. If you happen to notice, like, oh, one side of my coil is a little bit thinner than the other, you can always take some clay. Like I notice it's a little bit thin here. Maybe I rolled that part of the coil out a little thin. I'm just gonna score it right there and add a little extra clay. Not a big deal if you accidentally realize that you made your coil a little bit too thin in a specific spot. And just like we did before, right, I'm going to use my wood tool to kind of blend up and down. Remember, pressing firmly enough to bring the seams of the clay together, but not pressing so hard that I smush my shape. Okay, again, I'm just going to do a little section, and then I'll do a time lapse of me finishing the mug. So I'll do a small section on the outside, right? I'm going to fuse on that little extra piece of clay that I used to make up for that thin spot. And then I have to go on the inside. So it gets a little bit trickier when you go on the inside. You got to use the wood tool. This is where your thumb's going to come in handy as well. You can simply keep it on the board, but because I'm filming for you, I'm holding it up. If you feel more comfortable holding it up and not having it on the board, that's fine. I kind of have my wood tool here a little bit on an angle. Then I'm going to take my serrated tool on the outside to help straighten it out. Make sure my wall stays nice and straight and flat. On the inside, I'm actually going to take a tiny bit of water on my thumb. And because it's kind of hard to reach inside with the wood tool, although I did it pretty well, I'm actually going to use my thumb on the inside there. You will feel the clay is softer now because I just added a plastic coil. Again, I will use my barely damp sponge to kind of clean up that outer edge. I can hold it, support it with my hand, and use the sponge to do the inner edges, right? So you can start to see how my walls are getting fused together. It's beginning to get fused together on the outside. It might need a little bit of work. And I'm gonna do time lapse now to show you as I build up the height of my mug. And I would say I want my mug to be no taller than 5 or 6 inches. For me, 5 inches for this mug is gonna be a nice size mug. I'm gonna wanna drink tea out of it. And so I'll do time lapse and you'll begin to see me using the same techniques over and over to build the height of my mug. And you will also notice that the video will be paused. I'll end up going to fan my clay, bring it back, and then continue the time lapse together, and it'll all be edited together. But it's important to note that after I put on the next coil, right, I'm gonna fuse the rest of this, fuse the inside, then slip and score on and fuse my next coil. When I'm done with that, I'm gonna pause the video, put my mug in front of the fan for a few minutes, roll out my next couple of coils, then I'll restart the video. So you're gonna see me build up the mug, but I do want to point out that every 2 coils, I will be putting it in front of the fan to make sure it gets leather hard.